Welcome to Beyond Vows Veils, your luxury wedding experience. Our podcast, I feel, is a treasure trove of inspiration and insight for newly engaged couples. Join us as we have captivating stories, expert insight, and real wedding experiences that you can listen and learn from. Welcome to another captivating episode of Beyond Vows and Veils. Today, we're going to be talking about how to craft your perfect ceremony. So if you're anyone that has been struggling with how do I write my vows, how do I create a ceremony that feels like me, but still honing in on the customs and cultural traditions that my family may want me to also incorporate, I feel like today's episode is going to be really for you. So we're honored to welcome a true visionary, which is Tanya Pushkine, who has background from Broadway to also corporate America. She's rubbed shoulders with icons, y'all, like Lady Gaga and Beyonce, and she's honed her skills as a global communication and brand specialist to take a deep dive into the passionate world of weddings. So as the founder of the Vow Whisperer, she orchestrates unforgettable ceremonies, crafting vows that echo the unique love stories of each couple she encounters. With a keen eye for detail and a flair for the dramatic, Tanya doesn't just write vows, she crafts experiences. So whether she's coaching nervous speakers or officiating ceremonies, her dedication to making every moment unforgettable really shines through. Based in the heart of New York City, Tanya's impact knows no bounds as she shares her expertise globally in multiple languages. Join us as we delve into her remarkable journey and discover the magic behind the Vow Whisperer. Welcome, Tanya. Okay, welcome back to Beyond Vows and Veils. We are honored to have our esteemed guest, Tanya, who is going to be chatting with us a little bit about what it means to craft and curate a ceremony and your vows that are specific to you and how that's going to elevate your overall experience when you're going into hosting your wedding events. But before we dive in, Tanya, I'm so intrigued by your background. I feel like you've sort of had many lives and many work experiences. And I'd love for you to just share, reading your bio and also getting a chance to connect with you about, starting your journey in Juilliard and then, being on Broadway and being in the public relations space. Maybe just hone in on how you feel like your past has sort of led you to where you are right now.
You know what was really wonderful, Brittany? It's as if like you really, in a nutshell, you actually really read, and your curiosity is wonderful because you actually know more about me than most people do, and I love that. I appreciate that. I've had a pretty extraordinary, well, it's plural, careers, all of which, I once was with a man in between my divorce and my second marriage. I was with a guy for a few years, and he said, make every day an extraordinary day. And I really didn't know what that meant, but I try to do that. Nothing is routine, nothing is normal, nothing is old and jaded. And I've just created, or I've been honored really to work for people who have allowed me to be as crazy, creative, insane, and to create projects. And I'm talking about my previous lives. To create projects. For example, I worked with Beyonce, and she's literally, I have her on speed dial, and I know her because we worked so closely together on a major project. Lady Gaga also. These are all experiences in my past which I was allowed to do what I wanted to do, and that's really why that background is kind of pretty cool and interesting. Yeah. Let's go back to Juilliard. So I was born in Brussels. I moved to America. My father was a conductor, orchestra conductor. And he was American, but he had met my mom in Europe. They got married. The kids were born and raised there. And at one point he said, I want to go home, back to America. So we moved back here, and I had always wanted to be an actress. This was the dream from, the second I came out of the womb, whatever. And I was accepted into Juilliard, into their acting program, which was a huge feat. It was like nobody gets into that place. And I spent 4 very, very difficult years there. The place has changed dramatically, but when I went there, they taught through humiliation. They broke you down as far as you could go. And then really, it was up to you to rebuild yourself. And it was very challenging. But net in the end, having Juilliard on my resume was, it was amazing. I got into all the auditions I wanted. I got the roles. Juilliard was a big key player in that life that I had. So I was an actress for 10 years. I had a great career. And even though I was very successful, you never knew when your next gig was coming. There's no security. You could be, riding high, doing whatever, but then you're unemployed for a year. So there was no true stability, and I had 2 babies, and it just wasn't working out. There was no security from my end, and I was married to a man who couldn't really be stable as I had wanted as a father and a husband. So after 10 years, I said, okay, it's up to me. And I reinvented. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was not educated in anything else other than acting. So I bluntly, I faked my way up the corporate ladder. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. But because I was an actress, I knew how to fake it. And worked my way up into running public relations departments and corporate philanthropy for big luxury beauty and fashion brands. It was an amazing run, incredible career, the Beyonce and the Lady Gagas and all of that, part of that. And 4.5 years ago, I got remarried, and it was covered by the New York Times in one of those big, it's like the weekly feature of vows. And the writer was at the wedding, and she came up to me after the ceremony. And first of all, I knew nothing about weddings. I'd gotten married once before. This was the second time around. I'd put the ceremony together, and my daughter officiated. We had no idea what we were doing. And my husband and I both wrote our vows, again, not knowing what we do. And we made so many mistakes. Now that I'm in this business, I think, how did we get away with this? But we did. So at the end of the ceremony or afterwards, this writer came up to me. She said, look, Tanya, I know what you do in your real life. It's great. You're very good at it. It's a big, glamorous, lucrative, fabulous career, but you need to think about the wedding industry. And I said, what are you talking about? This is insane. A month later, literally a month later, I quit that big, fabulous corporate career. And I said, I'm diving in. I don't know what this is. I have no plan. I have no strategy. I have nothing except for some ideas. And I went, okay, let's just do this. And so 4.5 years ago, I started this little business, which has grown. At the time I started it, nobody was doing what I was doing. And it's interesting because we did a competitive analysis on my business, and I have so many competitors now. It's unbelievable. But I'm still like, I started this. So the business now has evolved into, yes, it's helping. It's really about creating, producing an epic wedding ceremony. That's the umbrella. What goes into that is the ceremony itself, the vows, the readings, the this, the that. How do we create the most amazing, magical, engaging 20 to 30 minutes, or sometimes for an Indian wedding, it'll be much longer, or I don't do Catholic masses, but it's like, you could go there. But it's about, you want your guests to walk away. This is, first of all, the entry point. This is the beginning of the celebration. Of course, in other cultures, other things happen for days before the ceremony does. But traditionally, in everyday life, the first touch point you have with your guests, they arrive and they're led into the space, the ceremony space, the sacred ceremonial space. You want them to walk away from that space into the party with the most unbelievable, having seen the most unbelievable, memorable, engaging ceremony. It's such an important piece. It sets the stage. It not only sets the stage for the celebration, but it sets the stage for your marriage. This is the beginning of your marriage. It's so important. Ceremony is often an afterthought, and it shouldn't be. It's such an important element for the wedding. And, so that's, I rambled around and around. I went to Juilliard and I'm now doing this.
You did lovely. You did lovely. Honestly, I so appreciate you giving us that background, because I feel the same way. And I'm sure any one of my listeners, most of them are newly engaged couples, and I hope they're hearing this, that all I ever hear anymore is that we want to keep the ceremony to an hour. We want to keep it to 45 minutes. We want to keep it short and sweet. And obviously for the South Asian community, that can be a challenge, because you have expectations of the families to make sure that certain, rituals and ceremonies are upheld properly. And then you also have the couple that wants to make sure that it feels unique to them. And, Tanya, I think you totally transcended our conversation, which I so appreciate, in opening up the dialogue of making sure that couples remember why we're all gathering in the first place. And the reason, of course, you get to spend time, and there's the party and the entertainment and the decor and all those really great. But I think I would hope, it's been a while since I've been a bride, but I think that you would hope that you want your guests to come and feel connected with you when they leave on a different level, that they got a sneak peek into your private little world that the two of you have sort of created, and why you've chosen to really create a union around that, why you decided to merge two families, and what was it about this person that was super special. And so I want to dig into, when you start working with a couple, where do you usually start? Because for listeners that are just now tuning in, I feel that you're definitely a guide. I know that your company is called the Vow Whisperer. But I feel like you're a guide to help couples to better articulate their relationship, so that the people who come and witness their union really understand a deeper part of it. So how do you get to that place with couples that you have no obviously prior relationship with?
I'm really glad you've asked me this question, because again, this is not a question that I've ever been asked before, and it's so important. I have become, it's a guide, a confidant, friend, therapist. I mean, you're a therapist also as a wedding planner,
Sure.
You know that.
Mm-hmm.
There is something, very often I get hired and a couple tell me, we hired you because of your personality, and you're very calm, and we feel like we could learn so much with you. And like, this is not something I set out to do, to be some wise sage here. But I think it goes back to acting. When you're studying acting, you are digging so deeply within you, because you're studying a character that you're playing. You are, exploring all the facets of this character. And I think that I tend to do that when I work with people. I dig very deeply. And it's not something that I'm conscious of. It's just what I do. And the more I dig, the more wonderful material I get, and I really get to know these people, and I am able to guide them. Because a ceremony, and this is whether it's the actual ceremony or the vows or whatever it is, has to be a true reflection of this couple, of who they are, the personality of the couple, and as individuals. Right. Let's not forget them as individuals. So where do I start? If it's the ceremony, if I'm officiating, and for me, one of the very, very first things I do is talk about cultural backgrounds, which I know a lot of people don't cover. But for me, I absolutely love finding out about cultures and finding things about the cultures that I know nothing about. What can we bring? What did your grandparents do at their weddings? What's the ancestry from? What kind of cool little story is there that we can... So that's a very big part of the initial conversations is, let's talk about your cultures. What can we do to honor your cultures, honor your families? Nowadays, I have plenty of couples who say, you know what, my parents are my parents. We're not subscribing to their religious beliefs or cult, whatever. And then it's a different story. But we start there, and we do a lot of digging, because I think the ceremony needs that whole cultural element of it. So ceremonies, we start with not only the cultural part and the religious part, and what resonates with you, what means a lot, what you absolutely have to have in the ceremony. But we talk about, their values, their philosophies on life, on love, on relationship, on all of that is touched upon. It's an important element, and it all goes towards building those 30 minutes or an hour, whatever the ceremony is. When I work on vows with people, that's an extremely intimate process. It's important to know I work separately with each one, because I think you have to preserve the magic of the vows until the very last minute. So it starts typically with a questionnaire, and that questionnaire, I ask that the person sits with it, if we have the luxury of time, about a month. And the reason is because these are very thought-provoking questions that force you to really go back in time to all those memories and stories and moments you've experienced and obstacles you've had to work through. There's so much there that you need to unpack. And it takes time to unpack. You don't just sit down and I can answer all 25 questions. Like, what qualities do you love so much about him? Why do you want to marry him? Well, you're going to sit and write a few answers today, and you're driving down the highway tomorrow to work, and you think of 10,000 more things, and you go back to the document, and you edit, and you change, and you rewrite. And so it's a working document that I want you to keep coming back to. Mm-hmm. When the person feels as if they've really done the best they can to answer, they send me back the answers, and what's important to know is that I am not a vow writer. I guide you, I counsel you, I hold your hand like your best friend throughout this whole process. Together, collaboratively, we craft your vows. And we craft your vows using the answers you gave me, so that it is ultimately so uniquely yours. I have not written your vows for you because I'm not inside your heart. And so it's a very collaborative, can be very emotional experience sometimes, because so much comes up, but we're really hitting that real note within your soul and bringing that out. And so the vow process, it's very collaborative, it's very intimate, and everyone who goes through that exercise of the questionnaire, and I've had a few people who say, I can't deal with this questionnaire, can you just interview me? And that's fine, we do that too. But everyone who's done that questionnaire has come back and said, this exercise was so incredible because it reassured me and it confirmed why I'm marrying this person. Because I had to answer all of this stuff that I'd forgotten about, or, wasn't top of mind or whatever. And so it does a lot to that person. So it's kind of the process.
I think it's beautiful. I really think it's beautiful, the gift that you share with couples, because, for couples that are listening, we get to be involved with, as planners, fun conversations like budget development and finding the property and picking the vendors and all the tasks that sort of go into the months. And honestly, Tanya, when they're working their full-time jobs or they're in their residency and then they've got wedding tasks, I think it can be, if I can be so bold to say, I think sometimes you can lose sight of your intention, and you start to let the task sort of pile up and be almost like a stressor for you. And I think that's why we hear so often, wedding planning can be really stressful. But I think that if you go into it with on your intention always at the forefront of your mind, and I think that comes up through the work that they would do with you, it helps them to know that the bigger picture is at the end of the day that you're marrying your best friend, you're marrying your person, and why you're marrying this person. And I had a couple I worked with that was really lovely, and they told me that they had regular check-ins with their relationship on a weekly basis throughout the planning, because they would say, they always wanted to be intentful. Why are we making this vendor higher? Or is this really going to reach our ultimate intention of the guest experience that we're trying to create and provide? And I think that sometimes things can get lost in the shuffle. So having the questionnaire, provoking some questions, I love that, right? Because when are you, especially once you have kids and you know how it is, you're in the regular routine of things, you're not always in this mode of just always in this place of appreciation for your partner. Sometimes life just comes up. But I think before you walk down the aisle and commit your life to someone, being very clear about the reasonings, but also being able to share that with all the people that are there in a really very thought-provoked way is just so special. And there's definitely not a lot of companies that I know that are offering it to that level. Scratching the surface maybe a little bit, but I think that what you have to offer is obviously very different. Mm-hmm. So Tanya, obviously this podcast is primarily for South Asian clients. How have you helped? Because obviously I know you've done Indian weddings before. So I know some of the questions that some of the, listeners are probably thinking is, well, I have to have my Hindu priest. So how do I work with Tanya and work with my Hindu priest? So maybe talk through how that process would work.
And I have to tell you, I think my favorite weddings have been Southeast Asian weddings. They've just been so they are a spectacular thing anyway, for the most part. But again, it's my love of culture, and it's this culture in particular that I really, really love. It's interesting, I'm Jewish. I'm 100% Jewish, and I have done more Indian weddings than most, white officiants. And I've also co-officiated with a Hindu priest, so that if very often it's the family, we have to have a Hindu priest. And but then they manage to convince the parents it's okay if you have this Jewish high priestess, whatever I am. But there's always a way, and I feel that the Southeast Asian community is far more receptive to having a non-Hindu priest, especially if the couple is so evolved and so modern, and or if it's a fusion. I do a lot of Indian fusion weddings where it's incorporating I've done Catholic and Hindu, or Sikh and Protestant or Muslim or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely love doing all that. I'm so fascinated by these cultures that I think people pick up on that. And I did a wedding, I think it was my first Indian, I'm not sure. It was on the top of a mountain in Telluride, Colorado. Wow. It was, it was so epic. It was extraordinary. And it was a very, very full-on Indian ceremony, and it was just extraordinary. And I was up there on this mountaintop thinking, I've got to do so much more of these. These are just they filled me. It was such an extraordinary experience. This is kind of a calling. It's a passion for me. I think I've reached a point in my life where I'm not working just for the paycheck. I'm working because, boy, am I just getting so fulfilled. And so, the Southeast Asian weddings for me are truly my favorite. I have really learned an enormous amount. I do speak a little bit of Sanskrit now, and yeah, it's sort of second nature to me now to do these.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I think that would you say that it would be appropriate to say that if you had a couple that did the traditional Hindu ceremony, that they could then fuse you into, whether it be beginning, middle, end, where you're able to obviously come on and bring that intention that the couple wanted to fuse into their ceremony? Because I know when we've done fusion weddings, like I've done Jewish Indian weddings before, and
Right.
we had both the rabbi and the pundit there. And
Right.
so we sort of had to figure that out. And so for anyone listening, if you are doing a traditional Hindu ceremony and you love the idea of curating an experience, Tanya, I'm assuming that you did collaborative efforts with both the couple and the Hindu priest, and we kind of walked through the different steps and how would we sort of integrate all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's a lot of work that goes into this, much more than a traditional ceremony, far more. And especially if
Right.
it's fusion, because you are incorporating so many things and you have to collaborate very, very closely with whoever you are doing this with. And I've done all kinds of variations, whether it's been a pundit or it's been a family member, or several family members. I just did an Indian wedding a couple weeks ago where it was the uncle who would come up, and we did a lot of the prayers together. He would do Sanskrit, I did English. There's so many ways of doing this, but it is a collaboration. I'm not off doing my own thing and they're off doing their own thing and see you at the ceremony. No. And we rehearse on Zoom, because there are too many moving parts to these ceremonies. Too many
Right.
things, the garlands and the this and all the stuff that we're dealing with, and the Lord Ganesh statue. And I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of work that goes into this.
Right.
For sure.
Absolutely. And, I think that, going back to a lot of clients of mine that will say, we want to keep it short and sweet, Brittany. We want to keep it to an hour. We want to keep it to 45 minutes. I totally hear them on that. And I think that I don't know if the level of concern is because in the South Asian community, I know a lot of, at least my clients, they're very social. They attend probably 6 to 10 weddings a year on their own.
Wow.
Of their friends or family members or relatives. Like, weddings are just such a big part of their community. So when it comes ceremony time, I think the concern is if they're outside, we want to keep them comfortable. They're going to be too hot, or are they going to get bored during the event? And so
Right.
that's sort of why I wanted to bring you on, because I wanted to shed light that the ceremony, again, is the reason you're gathering. So if your intention is, let me create an experience that my guests walk away knowing me more, they know my relationship more, then I think that you've gotten the actual win of the weekend. Not so much the, all the excess stuff. Of course, those are things that are great to have. But if you were able to highlight and showcase that and have someone walk away going, wow, I didn't know that about them. That's really where you're like,
Right.
oh gosh, that's so great. And then that also gives all of your family members something to connect on and talk about and get to know each other more throughout the course of the weekend. But Tanya, I also wanted to ask, in terms of the services you offer, so I was exploring it. So not only do you do script coaching, you also direct and officiate ceremonies, you do ceremony production, and then you also support with public speaking. Can you shed some light? So obviously, aside from just helping couples potentially write their vows, maybe even being there on site to support with officiating, talk to me about the ceremony production and like public speaking part, because I want to make sure I kind of give a full overview of all the services that you can offer.
Thank you, Brittany, and I appreciate that. The public speaking part, so this is the one part of my competitive analysis where no one is doing this part, which I'll hold on to that.
Right.
Public speaking really guides whether or not a couple wants to say their vows at their ceremony, because it is a very private thing that you are making public. And what hinders couples is their fear, their very intense fear of public speaking. And by the way, the three biggest fears in the world that people have are public speaking, the fear of drowning, and the fear of being caught in a fire. Which is the number one? Public speaking.
Wow.
It paralyzes someone if this is something that they live through and they go through. And if somebody says to me, I really want to do my vows, but I'm terrified, we have to evaluate the torture you're going to go through. Is it really worth it? There are other ways of exchanging vows. You can do them privately. You can exchange a letter. You can do it at the first look. You can do snippets of it in the public ceremony. The rest, there's so many ways of doing it. So don't put yourself through something that is just going to, stress you up beyond. Let's not.
Right.
There are enough stressors, as you said. So, but for the most part, even if someone does have a slight fear or moderate fear, I do work with them, and we work through it, and we make it. There are all kinds of tips and tricks, and the more practicing they do with me, the more confident they become, and the stronger they feel. And so the public speaking actually encompasses lots of different things. And I will say that the delivery of the vows is just as important as the words you've written. Because you can write spectacular, marvelous, incredible words, but if you're falling flat, you sound really monotone, no one's going to listen. You've lost everybody. So the way you express yourself, the way you say, for the next 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 2 seconds or whatever it is that you're saying, you want that moment to be as expressive as possible. So there's the idea of expression, but there's also enunciation. A lot of people mumble. They don't know how to project their voice. Body language, that's part of the whole delivery. That's part of the public speaking. Men tend to shift. They sway a lot when they speak. I catch all that. Sometimes women play with their hair. They fidget. All of that. I catch all of that because it's important. This is the whole image that you're projecting. So public speaking really is, it's body language, it's the mechanisms, whether or not you're projecting your voice, you're mumbling, you're enunciating, and then it's also your expression. So it's all of these things, and we do all of that through practice. And for the most part, I really get people comfortable enough, and look, everyone is nervous. Even I get nervous as an officiant, and I'm a friggin' actress, So you use those nerves. That's a little bit of adrenaline. Awesome. Go for it. And you'll get through it. And when I'm officiating, that's the biggest compliment I always get. Thank you for your calmness, because you made me feel so calm before the ceremony that I was able to do this. I was able to feel so strong standing up there. And that's just something that when I get to a venue, and I always get there hours before I need to, I spend time with people. And sometimes we practice if they have time. There's so much downtime that there's always a moment to practice and warm up on their vows. So, my time there, hanging out with in the bridal suite or whatever, and it's not something I deliberately say, I'm going to calm them down. No, it's who I am, and I'm there, I'm hanging out with them, we're having a glass of Prosecco together, and it's my calmness that really helps, apparently, so much.
Yeah, I can definitely sense that from you, even Tanya, on this call. And I think that you definitely have that aura about you. And I think that's really special because, when you have something that could potentially take you out from being unpresent, like anxiety of public speaking or anything to that end, you don't want to miss the moment, right? By being so anxious of what am I going to say or how am I going to say it? Because I'm with you. I mean, I recently attended an event where, it was a Party Slate event, which if anyone that knows Party Slate, it's a bunch of, obviously, us industry pros, and, they put on some events and what have you. And I remember I wanted to ask a specific question, but I didn't really fully rehearse the question. Like, I knew kind of the crux of what I wanted to ask. But even me, I run a podcast. We have, multiple events. We talk all the time. We talk to industry pros all the time. But I got that mic in my hand and I looked around and the room was like a ton of people that I didn't know. And I just kind of got really shy on the mic. I was like, The question I wanted to ask. And I literally was like, what? It was like I was hovering over my body. I'm like, who is this person? And so I'm just saying that for any couple that's listening, that even if you think like, oh, I've got this, you just don't know what you don't know. You've never been put in that situation before. You've never expressed your love and commitment to this individual in front of like all your friends and family. It's a very raw and vulnerable moment. So again, you can choose how you want to express that moment, but wouldn't it be better to be prepared for that moment so that you can be fully present? And when you're saying it, really who you're saying it to is the person you're getting married to. The people that are watching are just there to support what you're sharing. They're there to support the vows that you're making to that person. So I'm all about public speech coaching. I think that's a fabulous service to offer. Have you ever gotten, aside from just the couple family members, if they're going to be giving a speech that night? Because my son's 6, but I can only think that I would have to keep my composure giving a speech at his wedding one day. I mean, I cannot imagine.
I work a lot with families or bridal parties on their speeches, and a lot on the delivery. Very often they come to me, they've written the thing, and can you help me practice? And so very often that's the case. Yes. You know what's really interesting, because there's something you just said that made me think of this. I love when a couple say, I have no problem speaking in public. I'm a lawyer. I'm like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about, because that's great that you can litigate in a courtroom. That is very different than spilling your guts out. So I always think that that's funny, but yeah, no, 100%, I do.
It totally is.
I know, right? I do work with families, and something else that I do that you can't quantify, and I know you do this too. We manage family dynamics. And that's a big part when I'm starting to work with not only the couple, and very often I'm coaching their officiant, who is a family member or a friend. And actually, I'd love to just change topics for a second and talk about that, if it's okay.
Yeah.
So
of course.
65% of American weddings are led by a family member or a friend. Then there is the clergy, that's another big percentage, and then a pretty small percentage are officiants. It's interesting that this ratio exists. But the friends and the family members really came out of the pandemic. So now it's a huge trend. And as a wedding planner, and I know because I have a lot of wedding planner friends, when the couple says, well, Uncle Johnny's going to marry us, then the wedding planners, oh no, oh my God, this is cringeworthy, because these people have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how to write a ceremony. They have no idea how to run the ceremony, logistically, all of that stuff. So that has become maybe the biggest part of my business right now, is crafting the ceremony. So I take it off that person's plate. So Uncle Johnny, Aunt Sally, whoever it is, you do not have to write the ceremony. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to Google how to write a wedding ceremony. That goes off your plate completely. And I work with the couple, just as I do as an officiant, same process. I work with the couple to craft their ceremony. Very collaborative, very involved. The three of us are doing this together. So they get exactly what they want. There are no surprises from this rogue officiant who's never done this before. And then what I will do with this family member or friend, several things. One is, after they've welcomed everybody, that person is usually standing up there. Hi, I'm Aunt Sally, and I'm standing here because blah, 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 blah. I've known my niece, my nephew, my this, my that. I've watched them evolve as a couple. I was there when he came out of the womb. But, all that yak, yak, yak for 3 or 4 minutes. I work with that person on that speech. But then, once the ceremony is finalized, I write stage directions for every single part, moment, element of that ceremony. And then we practice. We practice as if it's the real thing. And I'll practice however much this person needs or wants. And because in the end, they need to run the ceremony as if I was there. And usually they can. It's hard to get these people who don't speak in public every day to speak for that length of time and hold the room. You need to hold that room and engage that room and those guests. Don't lose them, And I always, as an officiant, I want to make it, I'm not going to say an immersive experience, but somewhat interactive. I want these people to be part of the whole experience, not to just to gaze us as voyeurs or whatever, I don't know. I want you to feel it. I want you to be part of it. And I want that officiant, this other non-professional, I want you to somehow learn how to hold that room. Feel the energy of your guests. I know as an officiant, sometimes I'll feel the energy, and sometimes it can be amazing, and they are right there with me. And other times, it's so blank, and I am not feeling anything from this group. And it's a much harder, it's a lot harder work for me to try to get these people to be part of this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the coaching of these people is... I mean, that's just a huge, huge part of my business. Sorry, I went off topic for a second.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I'm totally with you, Tanya. We absolutely, especially when we do fusion weddings, if we're not going to do a Hindu ceremony portion, or maybe they're kind of doing a hybrid, they do oftentimes have family members or relatives that will step in. And I'm with you. I'm kind of like, it's personal. And so that's the one element I can understand why they would select that. And yet, collectively, you are spending, a small fortune on the weekend to make sure that it's a great experience for everyone. And oftentimes I feel like the ceremony sort of gets like the last look and outside of decor and things like that. And so I definitely feel that it's incredibly important that whoever's officiating your ceremony, it is prepared and understands the audience, can read the room, can shift gears if they need to. Because again, ultimately, you have to go in with, what is my intention for my ceremony? Is my intention just to get through it and like be done and walk away and like move on to my party? Maybe it is. I don't know. No judgment if it is.
Right.
But if your intention is for your ceremony to be connective, and for people to learn a little bit more about your union and be inspired, maybe even from some of the things that both of you have worked through or gotten through. Because we both know, and we know relationships perfect, and sometimes it's the hardships or the challenges that you both had to work through that really create the strength, that build the foundation. And those are the things that maybe you don't have to like shed light on during your wedding ceremony, but you can do it in a way that your guests and attendees can understand, why you've chosen each other, So I love that you mentioned that, honestly.
Good.
Tanya, I could talk to you literally forever, but I do want to conclude on a couple of things. We end every episode, by saying, you don't know what you don't know. Because I'm a true believer that until you're in the thick of something and you're working with pros, you just don't know. Is there any advice or, anything that in particular, any couples that are listening right now that you just feel like would be a really good thing for them to consider? And it could be vow writing, it could be public speaking, it could be anything pertaining to ceremony, or just any words of advice that you have just through your experience.
Make that ceremony a priority. It's what you as a couple are actually going to remember the most, more than the first appetizer or the first dance, or that moment of the ceremony is also what your guests are going to remember the most. And so prioritize it. Don't leave it to the last minute. Really invest in making this period of time as magical as possible. Start early if you can. There's no reason why. I used to tell couples, we can do it a couple months before the wedding. Not anymore. Now it's like, let's get going as early as possible before you enter that zone of insanity, crazy stress. Right. So make it a priority. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, I really love that. And it's something that definitely, our office certainly is always about making sure that the ceremony is memorable and thought of. So I really appreciate, Tanya, you coming on and sharing your words of wisdom. I'm so fascinated by your life and the journey that you're on right now. So thank you so much for really sharing all your insight.
Thank you. And this, I have to tell you, Brittany, you have been so incredible, like really so far more in depth with me as a guest than in other situations, and I really do appreciate that. I sense that you have been really interested in not just recording a podcast, and that's huge.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tanya. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.